Do you remember the Hush episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer? The Becoming Buffy podcast did an excellent breakdown of this episode. Spoilers for this episode and for I Love This Scream, because there is a climactic scream at the end of this episode, and it actually inspired the climactic scream at the end of I Love This Scream. The Becoming Buffy podcast is going to explain this episode better than I do, so please go watch it. But to summarize, the gentlemen, the monsters, come into town and they steal everyone's voices, which is also representative of the patriarchy. So when they unalive the victims, they can't scream. No one can hear them. And the way to end this is that a princess has to get her voice back, scream, and kind of break the curse. Again, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it stuck with me. What's so interesting about this is that the female scream in cinema usually means something else. It is the scream of someone who is being attacked, someone who is being conquered. It is a scream, as the podcast says, for the male pleasure. And what's so interesting about this episode is that it subverts that trope. It completely flips it on its head, and Buffy's scream is more masculine. It is one of conquering. It is one of empowerment. This is her scream at the end. If you've watched the show, you know it is a classic episode. So I love Buffy and love everything they did with the scream in this episode. But we've come a long way, and I do read a lot of books with badass female characters with female rage. I support all of this. However, I like to do it a little differently for something new. And instead of taking a seat at the biggest seat at the table for the boys, I'd rather have them come over and take a seat at our table. I want them to have to play by our rules. And one of the strengths I like to highlight with feminism is the strengths of the female community, which is connection, friendship, community. So therefore, the scream is just one part of the climax in this novel. But Avalia screams, and it's not the same as Buffy. It is not a phallic kind of symbol of masculine empowerment. So her scream doesn't break a curse per se. It's only one component. Her scream connects to another woman, and it kind of pierces through her dementia. It breaks through enough of her brain fog and jogs her memory, so that there is a connection to set what is necessary in motion. So it's more about using our voices to connect to one another, using those relationships to solve the problem. So, I don't write a lot of sword fighting badass women. I did in my last series, I did the same thing with a more softer Sansa Stark type of skill set. So it's using what I would consider the innate strengths of women and putting that to the forefront as solving the problem instead. So it probably seemed meaningless to a lot of readers, especially if you haven't seen the Buffy episode Hush. Most of my books are pretty feminist, but it might not always look like that on the surface level. If you're just reading, it seems like a scream, but if you dig a little bit deeper, that was my meaning behind that shared effort.